Thank you for joining us for today's panel. How do we show up for the work? How do we engage in the process? I'm first going to start off with introductions because we have a great panel of people here today. I'm going to keep mine extremely brief. My name is Ernest Briggs, arts administrator, actor, producer, writer, director, sometimes all at the same time, but I would really prefer not to be. And I've worked here at Nimbus, 6 or 7 shows over decades. Yeah, there's some decades in between there too. And worked in Devised theater quite a bit. I'm also going to be teaching Devised theater at Gustavus Adolphus College actually this fall and this spring, trying to put a show up on its feet from nothing, starting in September and hopefully going up on stage in December. So if you'd like to come see that at some point in the process, please come join us. And I'll pass it up.
Jackson Heyman. I'm an actor, director, playwright, founding artistic director of Special Interest Theater, brand new company here in the Twin Cities, as well as a professional Dungeons & Dragons game master who has taught workshops on how to use D&D as an engine for creating devised theater.
I'm curating he, him, and I mostly am an actor, and sometimes I get to direct as well. I'm here for the inclusivity portion, particularly inclusivity in the audition room, and then how directors can help be inclusive in the directing room. If I cough, I apologize. I just want everyone to know I'm not contagious. It's a immune response pneumonia that I have, so I promise not to get anyone sick.
I'm Starla, actress. Mostly have done Devised theater through many years. Nimbus recently, or last year, and then I don't know if you know Brenda Vargas. I just finished a show with her in the winter. That was a lot of fun. Always very different. Every show is very different, so enjoy it a lot.
Hi, my name is Eliana Meyerowitz. I use she, her, and I am an actor, director, and for the past 3 years I've been working as a performing arts instructor at Interact Center for the Visual and Performing Arts. So we have the Visual Arts Department is a progressive art studio, which is a movement that kind of started in the 70s and has been growing, where it's working with basically a studio that's with people with mixed abilities, so that there is more like support and mentorship and enabling people in their professional careers. And I'm on the performing arts end, where we've done a lot of basically, this is the first year we're doing a pre-scripted show in October that I can talk more about. But in the past, it's been creating completely original shows, musicals, so writing, coming up with characters, songs, scenes, and I'm here as someone who works at Interact and has gained some access and knowledge that way, not necessarily on behalf of Interact. And in my own life, have done some devising work, various companies, Birthday Project, and also in 2022, I did a fringe show with a director named Coley Shaw. That was really my first time creating a fully original show. A small group.
We know Coley.
Oh yeah, big fan.
Hi, my name's Brenda Starr, and I am here. Zoe asked me to come. I am affiliated with Theater 55, and Theater 55 is unique in that it only hires actors and actresses with or without experience who are 55 years of age or older. And we offer dance classes, improvisation classes, coaching classes for vocal as well. So we coach you into helping you achieve a dream of yours, if that in fact is what you want to do. And so that's what Theater 55 does. We are using performance art as a platform to fight ageism in this country. And we have had quite a bit of success. We've done somewhere between 10 and 12 shows. They're all musicals of sorts. Right now, our current show, which will open in October, will be Sweeney Todd. And I just got off the stage in February. We did Little Shop of Horrors, Cabaret, Into the Woods, Jesus Christ Superstar. So we've done quite a few quality. Hair was our first show, in which we wound up on the front page of the New York Times. I did. Okay. And I'm excited because it was born because in this country, only at the time Theater 55 was born in 2018, only 3% of theater houses in this country would even hire older actors. So that's our niche, and thank you.
Hello, my name is Mitchell Frazier. I'm one of the artistic directors here at Nimbus. I am also a director, mostly lighting designer, and technical director at Roseville High School, and have done quite a bit of devised work, especially here at Nimbus. And a reason why we wanted this panel to come about is to cover a number of different subjects. We want to talk to the folks out here. How many people have ever done any devised work in the audience? So quite a few. And so we want to talk to both you and get feedback from you on what that experience is like and some ways in which we can get more people to want to do devised work. Because obviously we find the investment in creating stories from ideas and thoughts into new pieces is worthwhile and worth doing. So we want to also generate some ideas within this panel of how better to do that.
Okay. And I'll just add to that too, if at any point like a question comes up or you want to just like jump in, it's really a little bit more free form for this panel, but like we have some things that are going to guide us through, and there's going to be more of a time at the end, sort of a Q&A from everybody out there. So, but if at any point you have a question, please put your hand up and go ahead. We'll just definitely take it.
And this is not an empty chair for no reason. This is not a Clint Eastwood thing. John, one of our panelists couldn't make it, so I'm going to get rid of the chair and
Just
we'll
so
get
it
started.
doesn't distract anybody.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk to the empty chair. We're not going to have one of them moments.
Nice.
So, to begin with devised work, one of the things that we have found is that people have a certain apprehension when they see devised theater on the audition slip. And coming in and going, well, I don't know what that is, or I don't know if I'm right for that. And so one of the first questions that we wanted to pose and answer is, what do directors look for when actors come in to audition for devised work? One of the first things I look for is someone who is willing. That idea that they're not going to get thrown off by the fact that there is no script. The words have not yet been written, and you're going to go through the process with us. At Nimbus, one of the things that we try and do is we really want everybody to be a part of the process. All the way, both the production folks, the actors in the room, we want you to become experts in the information and to be able to add to the process. You are part of what creates the work. And so we tend to ask a lot of you in that. We want you to do research. We want you to really create these characters based on the information given. We may start off with an idea, and that idea may be a perfectly valid story to tell. We may end up with a perfectly different story to tell in the end. In fact, often that's the way it happens. And so when you are auditioning people, you want people who are willing to say, I can do that. And because it is a lot to ask of an artist. The other end of it is you want artists. You want people who come in who go, I may not know what this is, but I'm willing to do it. Or I have an idea, and I'm willing to learn more about it. Not every theater company does devised work the same way. In fact, none of us do devised work the same way. Let's be honest. That was a bold statement. The real statement is we all do it differently. And so we wanted to demystify a little bit of what that audition process might be like, and to also generate some questions from you. What do you feel has been a barrier to people coming in and auditioning for a devised work? Anyone? Anyone on the panel also?
Yeah?
I feel as a transplant to the scene, who's been here for almost 2 years now, I find that a lot of devised work that's happening in the cities is being done by an existing ensemble. So I think to start, oftentimes there are no auditions. So if you talk about how to do the auditions right, maybe start with having more auditions. And not to say that I'm sad that there aren't auditions, because doing devised work can be incredible when you have a tight ensemble that's already worked together a time. They know how each other work, they work efficiently, they be productive, and they create amazing pieces. So I understand why so many groups don't cast outside or externally, why they keep their people. But I think that's a huge barrier for a transplant like myself, is that there's a lot of having to, before I can even be in the room, I have to already know people to even get in the room, right?
I very much, speaking to James, I grew up here, but then I went to school in Milwaukee for 4 years. I left, and then COVID happened, and then came back to a theater community that kind of didn't exist for a little bit. And so it took a long time for me to start like breaking in both as a performer and as a director, until eventually starting my own company, which I have been wrestling with that as well, of like, do I just work with the people I know, the people I can trust, or do I open it up to other people? And that has been a struggle, an internal struggle that I've been dealing with as well, and wanting to open it up to other people, because we can benefit so much from new voices in the room. And that is something that I've been really trying to work with as I've been creating stuff of my own.
Speaking specifically to barriers to access for people with disabilities, I think one important kind of framework is that there's a big difference between saying all are welcome, we are open to people with all abilities, and saying we have created a space for you. We have created a space with you in mind. And a lot of that is like, a lot of people with disabilities have to make decisions about what is going to be worth the work that it takes to get to the door. Not just what's going to happen once you're in the door, but time for planning things around transportation, knowing what to expect, people who use wheelchairs, not just is there a ramp, but are the doors wide enough for a wheelchair to get through? Has anybody checked that before this person is arriving? Are the bathrooms wheelchair accessible? Can you afford, if you can't afford a sign language interpreter, just being upfront and straightforward with that information. And even if it, ends up turning out that no one is engaged with that information, it's at least communicating that there's been some thought put into it. And at the end of the day, it's like when it, comes to accessibility and inclusion, not having it be an afterthought, not having it be something that's here's our existing thing, how do we make adaptations? But a lot of it is having people with disabilities in the room, doing the research and hiring someone from the get-go, because we're looking at something that's systemic. As people who are all together creating what we want theater to be and rethinking what are norms that are serving us, what are norms that are not serving us, even just the communication to get people to the door to audition goes a long way, and takes people involved in the process.
And I knew you were going to speak to that.
Yeah.
But I was waiting so I could add on to that. Is that like a lot of the devised work in the Twin Cities, particularly, is, and I have done devised work well before COVID, so it's been a while. But a lot of it is very movement-based. And so anybody with any mobility concerns or questions, including, do they mean movement or do they mean dance? Because those things are totally different. And you know, you can have a lot of people who are like, I can do movement, but I can't do dance. And then if it is dance, then I'm not going to show up because I know that if they're really looking for dance, that's not something I can do, so I'm not going to show up, including for all sorts of mobility reasons and age as well, because a lot of devised work gears young because of a heavy movement that even though they do say all abilities, all ages, all et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that comes off a lot of times as more of a, we gotta put that in so we sound good, but is that really what you mean? And so it's very much
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of it comes down
upfront.
to knowledge, right?
Yep.
To learning from people, learning from one another. And I think a lot of times things with very good intentions just end up having poor execution, which no one wanted. Nobody was seeking that out. When it comes to like movement specifically, I mean, you can research and find like paid consultation about how to incorporate people with different bodies and abilities, and like analyzing what practices and expectations are actually necessary. I mean, this is maybe more in the rehearsal process, but you know, do you need someone to freeze, or is it something where you can move slowly? Is it something where people need to be lifting both arms, or can they do just one, right? Saying like, what paintbrush is this person walking in with, and how open am I to the shade being a little different than what I planned, right? Which is so much of what devised work is taking the people in the room and working together.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on that in my own experience.
Please.
I have very limited experience with auditioning for Devised show. I have not done a Devised show. That's why I'm interested in learning more. But I do know that some anxiety that comes up with going to these auditions is like not knowing what's going to happen because it's not prepared. It's not a monologue, not singing a song. Like it's a lot of this movement based and coming in from like I have an invisible disability. And so like if I feel like I'm unable to continue and I need to sit down and rest, like, I don't want that to look like being lazy and like I want to be a part of this, but I also don't want to like hinder it and like just maybe like being able to know going into it, like kind of learn what to expect and like how do I bring forward that like, you know, this is something that I need like an accommodation for understanding of.
One of the things I think is great about devised work is you go into it with all those things in mind. So if you're sitting in a room of creators, of artists, and you say, these are my limitations, but this is also what I bring, the ideas that I bring, the experience that I bring to this, that may actually help to create the character that you are. And now you have the ability to create that character given whatever special skills you have. And that idea that it becomes a part of the storyline is fantastic. We were talking earlier out in the lobby about the statement that drives me crazy, which is colorblind casting. The idea that your audience isn't going to see from there what's happening up here and ignoring that. I don't think that's a great way to present art. And so we should always take into account all that you are when we create these works. And I think that's what Devised Theater has the great ability to do.
To speak on what you were saying a little about the anxiety of those auditions a little bit, I mean, as an autistic person, like, those Devised Theater auditions are kind of the scariest things for me. Like, having no idea what you're about to walk into and suddenly being, like, thrown, it's kind of it's a little accessibility issue. And I think proper communication, at least what this will look like and what you might expect, is a big thing that I look for when I'm, scouring audition postings, looking for what to be working on and just making sure that, like, oh, okay, now my brain can over prepare for what I need to do to make sure I'm ready to go.
I mean, I'll also just talk from a perspective. We're setting up like auditions like the Status right now for a lot of devised theater work. Tiger Lion's also doing a show there this fall. It's going to be outdoors in their arboretum. And then the show that I'm going to be putting together from no script whatsoever is also holding auditions. But we also talked at length about, do we want it to be monologues? And we both of us as directors kind of decided, we were like, we don't really dig monologues because it's always somebody trying to present something to us. So we kind of hit on the idea of like pulling some poetry and then putting it out on a table. We're going to tell all of the students about doing this as well. Like, we're going to tell them there will be poetry options, and we're just looking for you to engage creatively in whatever that is. And then maybe there's going to be the ability to sing if that's something that you want to do. But letting people know, I think, is something that we had talked a lot about, letting people know what the parameters were going into it, especially if there's a movement component to it, because we're still sort of like hinging on that a little bit.
Yeah, and something like that, again, saying, okay, there'll be poetry to choose from, is wonderful. And also sharing that poetry with enough time for people to prepare it, saying what you're looking for in the poetry. Are you looking more for physical interpretations of the language? Are you looking more at hearing their voice, right? Or saying if there's a singing portion. Another option, like one artist I kind of talked to about some of these questions was saying, we have an artist who worked with 10,000 Things in their production of Helen, and they came to interact and did auditions, but he was saying what made it simple for him, what made it possible for him was that he did a monologue that he had already been working on and preparing as part of a film that he was working on, and then for singing he sang a song that he had written. So he was able to show a lot of himself with something he'd already put the work into. So I think there's like just having a lot of options of being like, we would really love some of these, here's ample time to pick from them, or come and tell a joke, what are you open to also? Yeah.
Any other questions about auditions? Because it's a big subject. I don't want to, but I also want to, yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of like contextualizing to get that impetus, like, okay, I'm going to make the effort to get into the room. Once you're in the room, though, especially for devised theater auditions, like any kernels of wisdom that y'all have with facilitating the actual environment, facilitating that actual the vibes that you want to bring to the table, to get people to take risks and want to pick up the ball,
Don't audition 42 people all at once.
We did that once. We're going to add a callback.
I actually want to hear from this side of the room. I know for me, if you walk through the door, I feel honored that you're in the room. And that's a flat statement. So I want to see what it is you want to present. But be open to direction. Because that's our first interaction. If I see something in the audition, I want to see where you go with it. And so one of the auditions that one of the most recent shows we did at Nimbus, the actor came in, they picked up a story that was so far from what their experience was, but when they read it with their experience in mind. The story was about this Norwegian family that went off in the woods during the war, hid. And the side that they happened to have was the night that they were going to go and leave. This was a young Somali woman who understood that same experience only from her point of view. So it was her leaving and coming here and what it took to get here. And so when she read it, that came through. And we just happened to have the writer who was in the room at the same time, and we looked at each other like, wow, would have never thought that story could come across that way, but it absolutely did, and it fit perfect. So they took a chance. They used what they understood and knew to tell the story in that audition, and it worked. And so you've got to be willing to take the side or the moment and say, how can I make this something that I can show them that speaks to who I am. That's my best kernel of knowledge, because that's the best opportunity for you to make that impression. Is that?
I'll add a little bit more to that too. I look for, as a director, I always look for flexibility and creativity. Like how are you being flexible in the process with everybody else that you're working with in the room? You know, what are you, and when I say creativity, what I'm really saying is, what are you adding to the process that is uniquely your own? And I mean that by every stretch of the word. What is something that you can add to this process that is you, that was not there before? Because that's the thing in my experience that gets people cast. That's also the thing that, as somebody who works in devised theater, I start pulling from where I was like, I want more of that. I want more of that to be in the process. Because then the story starts to pop more, because you're starting to get much more involvement in everything that you're doing. And it becomes much more real at that point. And then it goes down a I always say it goes down a rabbit hole that, like, I didn't think that was where the show was going to go. But then it becomes something that's like, the show can't live without that, because it just became so alive at that point. Because you put so much of your own personal stake into that. You know, we always talk about buy-in whenever we're doing shows, and when we work in devised theater, like, that's what makes it so possible to do that, is how are we getting buy-in, and how are you going down that rabbit hole to get there and actually cultivate that? And that starts by adding what is uniquely your own. And I always tell people this is the hard part, I think, for most performers, especially performers that have worked for quite a while. It always starts with checking your ego at the door with a lot of things. Like, things, that sounds easy, but it's not, because sometimes it feels like literally like you're doing a high wire act without a net. And you're like, there's gonna be a script at some point in 3 months. It's gonna be there at the end, but we don't know what we're doing. We're building it up right now, and it's all gonna happen, and we're building character, and we know this and we know that. But it's gonna be there at the end. You just have to trust it a little bit. And you have to move your ego aside in order to do that sometimes. And that's not as easy as it should be sometimes to do that. But that means you just have to, like, pull back a little bit and just trust the process a little bit. I'll open it up.
Were you asking more like as an actor or as facilitating
No, as a
actors?
facilitator, like,
Yeah.
I suppose if you have any stories or, I just understand that, like, hearing y'all speak, everything is situational. What, if you do have someone with an ego walking through the door, how do you get real with them right away? Or someone who you can see they have that kernel, that spark, and they've gotten into the room, they're trying for this thing. How can you, like, do you have any stories of how you saw them in that moment and that you were able to, like, give them the baton and say, I believe in you, you can get it and do it. I believe that you will find a way. So more from the facilitator's standpoint, from the witnesses to the audition. Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I'll even add to that, I just did some work with a Kidawin this last month. Does everybody know what a Kidawin is? It's a program in South Minneapolis that works with indigenous youth from all across the metro area. Like, there's some kids that live right there in South Minneapolis. Some of them are coming from as far away as, I want to say, Alexandria. We actually had a student that was in the program. Very soft-speaking young woman. And I cast her as the lead in this devised theater show that we were actually creating. And part of the process that actually worked for that for me is we start every rehearsal on the same plane. Everybody's sitting in a circle, engaging with one another, sharing something about themselves, because in some cases, in spite of the fact that a lot of them had been in this program for years, some of them hadn't really gotten to know each other. They didn't know a lot about each other. So tearing down that barrier is, I think, something that actually helps a lot. But also starting everybody else off on the same foot together is another thing. Engaging and just having fun and playing sometimes simple theater games that sound so simple. You know, we've all played variations on it, or variations of different things. I play one with a beach ball that involves sometimes counting or sometimes actually playing with categories, especially when I'm working with young students or working with a younger group. But the way that easily sort of cultivates everybody buying in and getting on the same page together and enjoying each other in the process makes life a lot easier as you go forward. Because it makes it easier for them to say, this, when I'm in here, I get to do this and I get to enjoy this process. I don't know what life is like for them outside of that. And for some of those students, it's a lot harsher than the life that they have to have in that room. But for those 3 or 4 hours that we're in that room, they have a lot of fun and they totally buy into everything that we're doing. And then you get somebody like that young student from Alexandria. She was the lead in our show. She was a mole queen in the middle of this show that we just did. That ended up being 30 minutes long, and it was really, really good. Yeah, it's good.
Everybody comes to any audition and any process with a preconceived notion. If you are as upfront and honest with people in the room, once you get past that audition, they're in the room to help create the story, you may have to talk about that preconceived notion. If it serves the story, which is the thing that we're always working towards, then that's fantastic. Most artists that I have met are pretty good with criticism. Some are not. I have met a couple. But that idea that this is how we're going to tell the story, and this is the story that we're moving towards telling, doesn't mean it can't shift, but you've got to be willing to go with that. And that's sometimes hard. And I know the first time that I ever had to do it as an actor, I was worried the whole time that we weren't going to get there. And I spent a whole lot of time worrying about how am I going to know what I need to do if I don't have all the things that I'm used to having. Especially with devised work, that's tough. And you have to help coach people through that process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, as you're talking to, I'm realizing y'all said 42 people in a room for a callback. Do you have any like formulas or tips for if you're doing a group audition, like doing those theater games in a circle? It's usually made, like if you're auditioning for a devised piece, hey, 12 feels like a golden number to be working with in order to like, I can see them, but they also feel immersed enough in a group that they feel that they can try things in front of you. Yeah.
What did we do for that one year? Remember, I think we had them do scenes in groups of 3 and 4 when we did that. I mean, that was 42 people at a callback too. So
Yeah, and we did movement, and Ernest led that because I'm not that good with it. But also, a lot of times we ended up just talking to folks, to be honest. It was difficult because we were only casting 8. So there were a lot of really, really good people who we could have cast. We could have gotten 4 different casts out of that group. There were some really, really good people who didn't get cast, who might have offered an interesting perspective. That's where you gotta make decisions, and they're not personal. And that's the thing I want to always tell people who go into auditions. Auditions are not personal. They never are. And you have to understand that you may not have been who they were looking for in that moment. That does not in any way diminish your craft or your artistic ability, ever. Here he is. See the empty chair? That's who it is. Hey, John. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of talking about a lot of things, and I will say, working with Madeline Wall, who I know was speaking on another panel, working with her, she would a lot of times be like, hey, y'all are asking me questions about can I do this, can I do that, and like, everyone close your eyes. She would say, then go to the permission store and take some permission, right? Like, really remember that if you've been chosen to be in this room, to really, to bring who you are. And I think a lot of that is also building trust, building safety, building, I think back to acting classes that I've taken, right? About, we've got a lot of, like I said, patterns and histories in theater that we can decide how we want to work with them, how we want to continue them or not. So, you know, as simple as like my high school director, right, would give notes at the end of the show, and it would all be stuff to fix, right? No notes, it means it's going well, right? As opposed to like an audition or something, if it's a group playing a game, shouting out things and being like, yes, that's what I'm looking for, right? Or like, ooh, yes, you tried. Oh yeah, that got funky, but like you did it. I saw you take the risk, and I want you to feel safe to continue to do that in this room. It's something that, you know, I think is like so core and fundamental, and sometimes we forget to verbalize and center and affirm with one another. And same thing, like I was saying before about belonging and like anticipating access for everyone, right? Everyone has access needs. Everyone has things, whether it's saying, hey, I really prefer to get feedback one-on-one as opposed to in front of the group, right? Any sort of things like that, having formulas for that, right? Or like whether it, and having, you know, if it's rituals of like a check-in at the beginning and end of rehearsal. Again, things that create that safety and less of a sense of right and wrong. And of course, yeah, communicating as things get clear, like, okay, this is where we're gonna place more limitations. This is where things might be a little less free-form and experimental. You know, that can be really helpful. Yeah, and again, just enabling people to navigate the rehearsal, the space independently, right? Not doing some things to anticipate those things, which again takes practice, does take conversations and communication, and just knowing that it's gonna take time, right? Then in the same way that like you have to trust the process of the show, you also have to build like trust in the process of, you know, we are gonna figure out how to collaborate together.
Jump on that a little bit. I mean, one of the big things I ask when I do audition people is how do you communicate? What do you need in terms of communication needs? How would you best like to be communicated with in terms of what is the best way to give and receive notes from you? How do you work with others? What is all of that? And I like, even especially with devised stuff, you're building an ensemble. You're building a group of people that's going to be working together for a long time, and it's going to be a little contentious sometimes because everyone will bring in different ideas. So you need to look for people who are willing to communicate and work with others and understanding each other's needs throughout that. And at the start of every rehearsal process I do, I also, you know, lay out how I work as a director and leave the space open for, I want to know how you work so I can work with you and we can make sure everyone's needs are met.
I'm going to jump in real quick so that this fine young man has an opportunity to introduce himself. Go ahead, John.
My name is John Stentz. I've done a couple of shows here at Nimbus, devised shows. One was just fairly recently, The Brawn Tide, and before that, Where the River Meets the Sea, where I played probably one of my favorite roles ever that I've done. It's been a fabulous time working with these guys.
You didn't like playing a tech bro?
Especially not now.
Oh yeah,
I had no idea. I would have brought some different things.
Prescient that might be.
That's true.
John is a wonderful artist, someone we love working with because he very much walks in the room with that yes and attitude, and he creates characters that are interesting during the process, and that's where I think I'm going to move the conversation a little bit. What happens once you get in the room? How do you work in a room where the first thing you hear is, we don't have any words on paper yet. You're going to help us create those words and characters in this room. What is that like? Let's go down the line. Anybody want to jump into that aspect?
I think you just start with John, since he just walked in.
Thanks.
I know, I'm going to throw you right into the fire.
So, it's a double-edged sword because as an actor, I mean, you walk into a rehearsal, a role, even, you know, an audition with some sort of framework of what you're supposed to be bringing to the character. You know, so it's a little intimidating, and it just, your brain kind of goes haywire. of what is expected from me. What are they looking for? And I mean, the first time I auditioned for these guys, I was in the audition and I walked out of there. I'm like, there is no frickin' way I am getting cast. Just looking around the other people, you know. And it turned out I did because they had something there that they really liked. You know, but on the other side, there is just this kind of open-ended, absolute total freedom of, you know, this is going to be a creation from the ground up. And, you know, it's rare within theater that you have the opportunity to do that. You know, to just, even the words, I mean, there's fewer things that are funner, is when you get to the final product and you're saying a line and it's like, I came up with that in rehearsal, you know? It's really cool. So yeah, I mean, it's terrifying, but it's also super, super exciting. You know, just starting off and getting into it, yeah.
I add on to that, like, it takes an insane amount of faith. I talk about a trust fall, like, you're gonna fall and, yeah, who knows what's gonna happen. That's really hard, especially if you're a control freak. I don't know if this is the right process for you then, if you're a control freak, because you can't have control. You can't, I don't know, maybe when the show starts, then the control starts, but before that, no. Yeah, so a ton of faith. Faith in, like, the people you're working with, even though you don't know them, and then also faith in yourself, that you were chosen for a reason, and you might not know what that reason is, but whatever, you're already bringing it to the group, even if you don't know what it is. It's there. So you have to have a lot of faith in that too. Yeah, and then like along the way, like I remember maybe the four weeks that we talking, and in my head I just blank. I'm like, I have no idea where this is going. I have no idea what this scene is, but just keep throwing up things like this and this and this, and you just keep doing that, and eventually like, okay, I think this is starting to connect. I mean, like, might be 5 weeks in or so. Like, okay, this is starting to be something, but even up to the very last moment, it's like, it takes so much faith. And also theater magic. You gotta believe in the theater magic, that it's gonna come together.
And I think the closest that I've ever come to in the devised work I've done is walking in without a script at all to start with. Was because there was always at least a loose frame of something in most of the shows that I had done. So for one, Umbrella Collective, if anyone remembers them, show that I did, it was, we had the title, which was basically just the theme, and then the playwright and director had just laid out poems, short stories, these things that fit the theme, and we started with that, with like, grab something, go up and just start working with it. If we incorporate this line of poetry in the show, or this bit of a monologue from this thing or something, this is great, but that it at least gave everyone who didn't know each other in the room that comfort to just start, because that's the most terrifying thing, is you're in a room with a bunch of people and nobody knows your strengths, and some people are really, really good at walking in and going, yep, I can start writing right now, I've got this character and I can start playing and I can do this, and other people are like, okay, I'm not good at that, but I'm good at taking what you did and going, this, and moving that around and shuffling it and helping other people in other ways. And I think that was one of the most important things I learned, was like, you really need to work as a group, and the ego is gone. Everyone feels that they're not good enough. Basically, is like the thought was, I'm not good enough, why am I here? But then having like that framework that you could all work together at, and even if I write something you end up using, I can give that to you, not as I'm forcing it on you.
And I think the other thing is like a willingness to adapt to things changing, and the willingness to be able to take something and throw it away if it's not working anymore. Which, for my own personal spirit, it's hard, especially with a neurodivergent brain and a brain that is so reliant on structure. There's a lot of rigidity there, and that is something I've had to talk myself out of so many times. And I do a lot of devising creation work with students, and especially neurodivergent students as well. And I have so many stories of working in special education of like students who will respond in strong negative emotions to just caring so much about one specific thing, and like the need to hold on to one particular line or one particular story beat or character trait that might not be working in the wider context of the group, but it is important to me, so I will fight for it. But a willingness to take stock of everything and understand, oh, this might need to change, and let's find a different way and work with everyone to collaborate on something new. And it's hard for a lot of neurodivergent autistic brains, just in general in life. But I think this is one of the greatest contexts to learn that skill to take outside of the rehearsal room.
Yeah, and I think also, so we're talking about, you walk in the door, you say, hey everyone, we don't have a script yet. Laying some expectations of, there are going to be times where you put work into something and we end up not putting it in there. And I acknowledge, I acknowledge that is work to put in, we acknowledge that this is going to happen, and that is what this process is. And also sharing if there are any guidelines or containers, right? Hey, we got a grant that says we need to talk about this topic, so this is one of the things that we're starting with. Or, hey, my plan as the person kind of directing or facilitating is we're going to use this first week for creative exploration, then move into characters and plot, then move into lines and script, and then ideally using this container of time at the end for putting it on its feet, rehearsing it. And again, expressing that these things may change, right? I'm anticipating there's going to be time needed for conversation, for naming what's working or not working. Also, again, working with Coley was so wonderful because we would sometimes just be given a prompt to go home, or a variety of prompts to pick from, and then have a showing, right? Have something where each person showed what they created, and maybe that was the piece that ended up in there, maybe not. I know Coley pulls a lot from moment work, from Tectonic Theater Company. I've done some training with them. Can't speak too much to that. Or I worked, we interacted a collaboration in January that John Ferguson directed that was also with the St. Paul Center for the Conservatory for the Performing Arts, high school students, and we ended up having 15 days to create this show that was about the Weimar Republic, but it was something where as things came together, John would write things on index cards, right, and move them around and be okay, so we had a visual of what was coming together, even if chunks were moving. So I think, giving people things to hold on to and transparency about, I haven't figured this out right now, but let's figure it out together. Or, okay, I'm making a decision for all of us that this is what needs to happen to get us to the next step. Again, I think communication and, how do you, not just how do you communicate, but how do you learn, how do you like information? Or this is how I work, I'm going to use index cards, this is what's happening.
And setting the expectation that we will not have all the answers until it's all done.
Oh, that's true.
Totally.
But I am listening and learning a lot about devised theater, and I'm juxtaposing that against traditional theater. And we have some of the same issues in that even though we come with a script, that's just a bunch of words on a paper. The job is to bring that script or that character to life. So, and that's just, you don't know where that is. You don't know who that is. You don't know how to create that. So then it becomes, what did the director see in me? Why am I here? Okay? And I'll tell you, when you're dealing, especially with older people, they've been in the world a longer time. And so they are ascribed to the norms of the world. And so now you're taking them to a place that says, be free. Don't sing like Julie Andrews. I want you to bring you to the party. Well, people don't know what that is. I mean, it's sort of like, you know what I'm saying? So then you have to help people find that. I remember that and then you have people who have acting experience, and people who don't have any acting experience. They don't even know if you said, I remember when I first got, he said stage left, and I just stood there because I don't know what stage left is. You know what I mean? Like, and then he said stage right, and again I didn't move because I don't know where that is. So you have all these people who come who have different abilities and disabilities, and some with older people who have memory issues, but they have it in their heart that they want to act. And so the director that we have is a person that I say he's special in that I don't know what he saw in me. I don't. I still don't. And I have been in 11 shows. I still don't. But I have learned to trust him. He has created something that makes me trust him. And so when we get the people in the room from the callbacks, and this is the group of people, right away he starts building an environment of trust. Right away he starts building community. Everybody is invited to bring something to rehearsal, and then when you get your 10-minute break, then we all eat and share. At the end of every week, we go out right someplace to eat together as a family, and then we share. I remember in the first show that I was in, I had a heart attack 4 weeks into rehearsal. It was also the first show I had ever done, and so I had to call the director and say, you know, I'm so afraid he was going to say, well, you're out of the show. I didn't want to call it, and so I called, and it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, listen, this has happened to me, but my doctors say I can still do the show. And he was like, you had a what? and I said it again, and he was like, you're talking about doing the show? Well, I did go ahead and do the show, but my audition song was doe, a deer, a female, because I couldn't sing. But somehow he heard something in that, doe, a deer, and I wound up singing in the show and wound up on the front page of the New York Times singing. So I think that we put a lot of, from where I sit, I put a lot of faith in the director, that the director's going to be kind. The director's going to try and work to understand how I think and how I respond, and be able to help me get to where he thinks I'm trying to go. And the last thing I want to say is that aside from building community, I mean, one of the bigger problems we have is that the family that we build for each show wants to come back and audition for the next show. And of course, we still need to grow, so we always want to have new people. But because we've built that family, then the family still wants to be part of the family and engage with the family, so it's hard to turn people away. But I remember that I went to one audition, and it was cabaret, and I was going to be part of the ensemble, and I decided to, what is it, the welcoming song, welcome, okay, and so I came ready to do, I could sing that. And I walked in, and I opened my mouth to sing, and the director says, do you know, so what? And I'm like, so what? What? Like what is that? Okay, I'm just like, so what? And so he starts, and so then he starts to tell me to sing a song that I didn't practice. I didn't even know, and my decision was, I don't know the song. I'm going to fail the audition. Should I do what he's telling me to do, or should I say, you know what, I can't do this? And I decided to do that. And then he said to me, sing What Would You Do? Now, that is a hard song, What Would You Do? And Brenda couldn't sing it, and I kept trying to sing it like the record. And finally he came to me and said, I don't need you to sing it like the record. I want you to stop doing that. Your job is to bring the emotion to the show. And he gave me something to read. My character was Fraulein Schneider in Cabaret. He gave me something to read about about her life, that so mirrored my life, that when I had to do the monologue at the end, I was Fraulein Schneider. And so that's how he got me, because he invested in me. So I don't see a whole lot of difference other than y'all start with nothing and create it. But we start with what's been created and have to recreate it. And so I'm not saying that it's right or wrong or good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying I see similarities between the two forms.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more we can bridge those similarities and make people comfortable, then we'll see more folks willing to do devised work.
And I'll just add to that too. I just got done teaching a class for Indigenous performers at the Guthrie, and we had quite a few people that were over the age of 50 take that class actually. And I do a lot of work with viewpoints. I studied with Alex Billings out in LA when I was out there. Anybody know who Alex Billings is? If you've ever seen the show Transparent, Alex Billings is an amazing human. Just a light in a world is the way that I would describe Alex Billings. But Alex Billings was a big proponent of checking in with people and making sure that you even when you're working with people as artists, you have to also work with them as human beings.
Right.
And we were in the process of working with that, and I was doing a lot of work with breath work and letting people relieve tension. We were in the room working on viewpoints, and this older person actually started to cry, and I went over to her and I was like, "Is everything okay?" And her response was, she's like, "I didn't realize how tense I was until this exact moment."
Right.
And I'm letting all of that go, and it's making me feel so good
Right.
that I have to let this out. Because it feels like I'm just keeping it bottled up in here. But it's nice to have a space where I can actually let that go. Because that's just not something that they get to do that often.
Right.
And I said, well, this is the space where you get to do that. I know the world is a tough thing. We try to put our blinders on and get through everything that we have to get through. I said, but here it's a place where you can actually create and do the things that you want to do.
And I remember that when I came back after the Christmas break, I had the heart attack just prior to Christmas, and I came back after the Christmas break. He created a circle, and he just said, he didn't even tell me he was going to do this, and he said, Brenda has something to share. And I was kind of stunned. However, I looked at him and I said about the heart attack, and he said, yeah. So I shared about the heart attack, and at that point, just in saying it, it began to open up something in the group, and we all sat in this circle, and I was stunned at how many people had heart problems and had heart issues, and it was that moment that crystallized us as a family. We just all started to work different, and so he creates those kinds of environments where we can share and become one group. So
I appreciate that. And I'll add the two pieces of advice just on top of everything that everybody's been talking about that have always served me well as a performer, but as somebody in the room as well. It's direct from Alex Billings. Alex Billings used to always look at me and say, just remember that you're enough. And it took me months to realize what that meant.
Yeah.
And the other half of that component, after we had a long discussion once about it, is I remember thanking Alex Billings profusely for saying that it's okay. It took me a lot to realize that I'm enough once I'm in the room and I get this opportunity to work in this process. And Alex Billings was just like, and I didn't do anything. I just helped you get out of your own way. Mm-hmm. So the question I always ask myself whenever I'm tackling any role or working on anything, in any process, devised or otherwise, is I was like, what do I need to do to get out of my own way when I'm working on this process? Mm-hmm. Those are the two things that always just rock me to my core.
Really good
in
advice.
anything. It's about 5:30, so I just want to make sure that we leave space here for anybody in the audience to ask whatever question they want to. So this is the Q&A portion of what we're doing. So if you have any question whatsoever, in any topic whatsoever, for anybody on the panel, we'll all gently jump in. Please don't feel shy about it. Anything whatsoever.
If you are a writer, or if you are the facilitator engaged with the writer, I mean, obviously as an ensemble with a devised piece, we're all the writer, but the person who is putting it on paper and showing up and saying, this is the working skeleton as of now. Do y'all have any advice or insights about like how does that person hold themselves accountable, like communicating expectations to one another? And I just keep thinking of the kid who was so in love with one line and couldn't let it go, like acknowledging that that passion for that line and saying, "I hear you," as kind of open-ended, but like accountability to the pace of the development of the piece and who is sort of the vessel that everyone is working through and with. Any insights on that front?
At Nimbus, we have the writer in the room, and they are there for many of the rehearsals. They are part of the process in which we devise. So I'm going to put Josh on the spot because the last play that Ernest and I directed, Josh was our writer, okay? And he was in the room. And there were times in which we did have some conflict on some ideas that might have gone a different direction. And so, Josh, let me ask you this question. In listening to those concerns, how did you bridge that gap between what the story was trying to tell and what those moments of wanting to hang on to an idea or a thought or a line were?
I mean, I think the best thing you can do for particular ideas is just to have lots of them. Like, I think the more you can be generative in your idea creation, the more you can be selective about the ideas you take, and the less you're going to be sad about one idea that you take, right? If you have 300 ideas and you know you can only fit 30 in, then you're happy about the ideas that were picked. So being generative is an important part, I think, of devised theater. Is we call it creating options, right? I also think, and I've been struggling, like there's a couple things that I've been struggling with as a person working in devised theater and trying to like build better collaboration is like how much, and this is about communication, how much can you build transparency into what to expect and how things are going. And you know, I think that's the other important part. I think it's important to check in and be honest with people about that. And that's something that I've realized over the years. Like that show was hard on me because I was working 2 jobs and there were a lot of factors, and I think I needed to be more, you know, you need to be clear with the people you're working with about all of the factors you're working with. And that goes, you know, when goes to like simple stuff like how do you feel, how does your body feel today, and you know, what are you capable of doing when at every rehearsal. But I think it's just important to really have clear communications. We also, I think the other thing that's kind of unique about Nimbus, the 2 things that are kind of unique about Nimbus, one, we do devised theater with a writer in the room. That's not always the case. And the other is we do prioritize design. There's some devised theater companies that just don't work with designers. And it's always difficult to have an acting ensemble that's in the room 5 nights a week or 4 nights a week or whatever the rehearsal process is, and then have a team of designers who are coming in and maybe aren't there as often. And you know, the feedback that we've gotten from them is that it often feels like things are changing all the time too fast, and it doesn't feel quite as the linear journey that the cast feels they're on. So, and part of that is it's just, it takes extra work to communicate and figuring out the best ways to let people who aren't in the rehearsal room know what happened in the rehearsal room. That's been something that we've been trying to, you know, figure out and hone in on, because one of the things we found is like the printed script is sort of a lagging indicator of what's happening in the rehearsal room.
right? So often, you know, we'll be creating, devising scenarios or whatever, and creating material that way, and then the writer's responding to that material. And so the production team will be seeing the scripts, but that's like a week behind what's actually happening in the rehearsal room, where the ensemble is, you know, and so starting to get tools that can help bring everyone along at the same pace without being onerous in work to, you know, to the director or the stage manager is something I've been trying to figure out for a while now. But I think it's important it's important that everyone is constantly communicating and checking in with each other, and everyone's on the same page about where the show is going. You know, you're talking about the note cards. I use note cards, right, as a writer. It's a common device, especially in the screenwriting world. And, you know, where your note card is just an indicator of a scene, and that scene may or may not exist. And you can move them around, and you can sort of see a story that way. So I've started trying to figure out how you can let people know, oh, these are the unwritten scenes. You know, these are the ones that we haven't devised yet. These are the ones that we haven't figured out how we're working them in. You know, and these are the ones that we're working on. And we started using a red, yellow, green notation for scenes, and this is also to help people with like memorization, right, and locking scenes. But we're like, red means this scene, we're just playing around. This material this could hit the cutting room floor. Yellow means we know this scene is in the show, but it's going to change, it's incomplete, it's whatever. And green means this scene is this scene is definitely in the show, and it's going to be very much like this. We're going to have to change some words, you know, of it to probably, you know, there's always like, I find that, you know, you get to the end of this show and you're like, okay, in order for this to work, we need to change these two words in this one scene. Like, that always happens. But we're using that red, yellow, green to help people kind of lock things in. The other thing that helps is just, you know, and our Mainstage show, you know, it's going to be very heavily movement based. And so using the choreography as a way to sort of build the structure and let people get to know the show, you know, and I think there's value in repetition and associating what gets written with what gets choreographed and built by the ensemble.
And to this note, I don't think you knew when you guys did auditions it was going to be heavily movement based.
No, we didn't.
So it's very much meeting the cast where they're at in terms of the movement. And that is definitely possible in devised theater.
Yeah.
And I think to the point that was made earlier is like, what do we know? And I think it's just confidence in walking into a room and saying, hi, I know it's movement based. I cannot take off my shoes. And like being okay with hearing no, and being okay with saying I'm going to hold my boundary. And that tells you something else too, is if they're so locked into it must look like this, then maybe that's not someone you want to work with. But I did have a question.
Hey.
About separate is we're talking about devising spaces, and I would like to ask you guys, as people who create it, what are some exercises that we can do as performers or actors on our own to help build these skills? So when we show up in the room, so like I'm going to give an example from scripted world is like being able to do cold readings in an audition. I started cold reading scripts out loud. Right? Like you don't know the script, you just start reading it out loud and figure out the thumb thing, practice that. So what is an exercise or something we could do to kind of build up our skill set to become better collaborators and more flexible in the room when we do get there? for the audition or the rehearsal process?
One thing I would say is if you can get comfortable with, the best way to put it, comfortable with your own ideas, no matter what they are, being presented. So, improv work is a great way to build skill because you're going to take a prompt or an idea and you're going to run with that. And you might even have the opportunity to do it with a collaborator or a group. And so I would say if you can and have the opportunity, see how much improv work you can get in so that when you walk into the audition and someone says, can you try it this way, you're more comfortable with doing that.
I mean, I'll also just add to that, like in any process, I try to introduce a lot of improv, like rules and, you know, the way of working in terms of doing a lot of things. The show that I was just talking about where the kid one didn't have a script. It was a 30-minute show. And I made the decision during the process. I didn't want the students to worry about having to get word perfect. I said, as long as we're getting this. And the weird thing was, through no fault of their own, they fell into a rhythm where they were always hitting the exact same moments, the exact same way they're supposed to hit them anyway. Because we would just rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it. And even if it was slightly different from the last time, they would always sort of like put the pieces back together and it always sort of worked, which I thought was a very unique way to do that. And I think that process comes from when we worked at Nimbus. Like we would sit and we would have conversations around the table about like this or about this concept or that idea for the show. And then we, you know, the question of what does scene look like if we had this with this? And we would create the parameters for the scene. And then we just put the performers in the moment and we just let them riff and see what happens. And like you said, then we add to it or we subtract to it and we just kind of keep the scene going. Because that's, in my experience, like that's a good way to cultivate